this,
Okay.
just so these guys, they're supposed to take notes, but just in case anybody needs to look back. So this is a class. It's Journalism 458B. This is an upper level elective. So we have some aspiring journalists in here, but we also have some that just are interested in sports, maybe sports management, sports business, marketing, video. So I love to connect them with people that I think are just great for them to know, great resources, great people that work really hard and have come a long way. So I wanted to introduce them to you. So if you don't mind just giving them a quick overview of kind of you and your journey. I told them a little bit, but I'll let you share in your own words kind of uh, LaChina's journey from Wake
Yeah, no,
Forest and from right down the street in Virginia.
right down the road. I was going to say I'm from Alexandria, Virginia. So, Maryland was actually the closest major university when it came to like ACC level play that I got to watch growing up. So my heart always beats for the Terrapins. But thank you, Rose. I appreciate just this opportunity to speak to the class. Let me tell you guys, you have the best in the business leading you. Rose is incredible. I've had the great opportunity of working with her through what she does for not just Maryland women's basketball, but Maryland sports in general. But when it comes to sports information, there's just not anyone better than her, quite honestly. We would always get together as talent and kind of say, okay, who's the best SID and who's Rose was always in the top three. It was like Rose, Lindy Brown. You remember Rose used to be at Duke.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there was Mike Mobley, who was at Georgia for a long time. I'm trying to remember. Someone was at Kentucky that was there for a long time too. She was another woman. So we always, were excited to see women get into the biz. Slack. You remember her, Rose?
Yeah, I do. I
Flax,
do.
yes. So
Yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah. I do.
he was one of the best. But so as Rose said, I am native Virginian. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, went to TC Williams High School. Didn't start playing basketball until I was in the ninth grade. So I was a late bloomer and quite honestly wasn't a very good basketball player at all. Therefore, did not get seriously recruited by Maryland, though Christy Winter Scott will claim otherwise. But I ended up playing college basketball at Wake Forest. I chose Wake because it was a great school. I love the student to teacher ratio. I needed that kind of attention. And my mother had basically crossed all of the party schools off my list. So Wake was all I had left to choose from. Just kidding about that. But which was great. I loved it. I ended up being all ACC as a freshman. Made pretty good grades. But when I got ready to graduate, I had no idea what I was going to do next. I wasn't as smart as you guys in this room who seem to already have an understanding of what you're interested in. I came into school thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, a lot more reading and writing than I anticipated. So that dropped off the list. And then I wanted to be a psychologist from what I had seen on television. I wanted people to lay on the couch and tell me about their lives and their problems, but I barely passed the intro class. So that got crossed off the list. And I ended up majoring in sociology because I just liked the coursework, quite honestly. It was like death and dying, marriage and the family, sports and sociology. I just loved the courses. So that's what I ended up majoring in. So you're probably saying, how did she get to broadcasting? Well, upon graduation, I didn't have the opportunity to play pro. I probably could have gone overseas, but had an injury that I was nursing. So I was immediately looking for a job and had done no legwork at that point. I was like, okay, basketball's over. I show up at the office and everybody's looking at me like, okay, what are you doing here? Like, this part of your life is behind you. Now you got to figure the rest out for yourself. So it was actually our academic advisor who suggested I apply for an internship with the ACC, with the conference office. They had, I don't know if they still have what they call the futures internships, where you get to interview with all of these different sports adjacent and affiliated companies that work with the ACC. And if you get lucky, you get picked for one of those jobs. And I think the options were like Fox Sports Florida at the time, which it doesn't even exist anymore. There was an opportunity to work at the league office in championships as an intern. So there was like eight or nine. And I ended up getting selected for all of them, which was insane. And I got to make my choice. And you would think I chose television, but I didn't. I chose the championships internship, the championship internship with the ACC, which was really the best decision I had ever made because I got to learn a lot about how sports works on the back end. And that was really where my interest was. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to stay in sport. So what this internship did with the ACC was I got to help with the administration of almost every sport championship alongside the league office staff. So whether it was golf or tennis, and I was also traveling to all the different campuses in the ACC. And at the time, there were only like 9. My
Yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
conference realignment, right?
Crazy.
So I
Yeah.
got a chance to see how everyone's jobs work, from sports admin to marketing. How do you put on a championship? All that kind of stuff. But when I was in my late 20s, I had like actually, first, after the internship was over, I got a job working at Georgia Tech in athletic administration as a recruiting administrative assistant, making about, I don't know, $22,000 a year. Basically taking all of the names out of the high school database and putting them in an Excel spreadsheet. But that was my first job. And I liked Atlanta. Georgia Tech was just, a great school. They were doing great in basketball. So that's the job I took immediately after being an intern. After doing that for about 6 or 7 years, I had been promoted to like director of basketball operations. I was the special assistant to the head coach. And I had like a quarter life crisis and was like, I don't want to be an AD. I thought I was on that track. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll keep doing this and I'll become an athletics director. And then suddenly I was like, that sounds really boring at 20 something years old to be headed on this track where I'll be in an office. I'm not going to be close to the game. And I wanted to be close to the game. Some people are fine with like, more administrative things, but I was like, I want to be on top of the game. I just didn't want to coach. So enter broadcasting into the mix. I started doing the radio for Georgia Tech women's basketball, which was the team that I was already working for. And I loved it. Quite honestly, I put on the headset and I was like, I would do this for free. And that is literally the one first piece of advice that I would give you guys is following what makes you feel alive, right? You may not know the path. You may not know how you're going to get there. If you know the right people, if you're major right, you may not have all of those answers, but I promise you, if you pay attention to the things that make you feel alive, that you wake up every day thinking about, that's going to lead you to the most fulfilling career that you could possibly have. And almost 2 decades later, I'm still working in broadcasting, starting in radio.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Um, I want to ask you, this summer you had the opportunity to cover the Olympics,
Mhm.
which, how did that opportunity come to be? I know that was many years of hard work to get to that point. Kind of how did the opportunity come to be, and then what was that experience like covering something like that?
Yeah. So when I started in broadcasting, like I said, I started doing the radio for Georgia Tech women's basketball, and things just progressed. And you're probably asking yourself, okay, but you weren't a broadcast major, you didn't major in communications, you had no experience. Like, how did you get into broadcasting? And it was really self-taught. Like, all the things that people are probably telling you about volunteering and getting a mentor, studying, becoming a student, an expert of whatever it is you're interested in, all those things are very true. And I did all of them in order to gain experience and learn the craft. The other thing about my entry point was I was getting into women's basketball. And 20 years ago, not everyone was running to cover women's basketball, right? Like, I'm a former player. It was more of like, oh, I want to do football, I want to do basketball. And quite honestly, it worked in my favor to make women's basketball my sport. Number one, I loved
Yeah.
it and I wanted to grow the game, but it just gave me more open doors and more opportunities. So my journey was probably different from most. I was told, when I was getting into this business, that as an analyst, you need to have a name, right? You need to be a Hall of Famer, win a national championship, win a WNBA championship. I did none of that. In fact, my team didn't even make it to the NCAA tournament, right? So with that being said, I had to take a different path to get into the seats that I've been in. While everyone else who was more established than me was maybe doing 1 game a week and they were doing premier matchups, I was doing whatever conference they told me I could do 4 times a week. Like, I was literally doing 4 games a week at one point, starting my career. Just imagine being in 5 different cities if you include going home for a day to repack your bag. But the payoff for me was I loved it. And I was also getting so much experience. So I was starting to close the gap with people who maybe played at a higher level than I did, or maybe we're doing higher level games than I was, but only working once a week. So I was really in the trenches. And what that did for me is I learned so much about women's basketball. I made so many relationships. I mean, I was in college basketball for 15 years. I've now been in the WNBA for 17. And most of my career was in the grind, just meeting different people, learning different styles of basketball. And so what happened with the Olympics was I have a really good agent. Her name her name is Nicole Lynn. She's actually Jalen Hurts' agent. We share the same agent. And she's fantastic. That's all I will say. She's brilliant. I'm her only broadcast client. I pretty much stalked her in the DMs in order to get her to sign me. But she did one really, really smart thing for me in my last contract is she made sure I wasn't exclusive. So I'm not exclusive to ESPN, even though that's who I've worked for since 2009. And since I have that loophole, I can work with other networks. So I have been able to work with Fox. I've worked with, I mean, everybody you can name.
You
Big
had us
Ten
with
Network.
NBC this year.
You said what?
You were with you had us on NBC this year.
Yes, NBC. And so that's how it all came about. I started working with NBC when they called me to do the Olympics for Tokyo. And what was that, 2021? And
Okay,
they had
yeah,
to see doing some work, and they were like, "Hey, can you come and maybe host for us for the Olympics?" I was like, "Sure." So that started a relationship with them. And long story short, they started bringing me into their women's basketball coverage, and they have the Olympics. And this year, for whatever reason, they decided to call LaChina Robinson with all the available gold medal Olympians that are possibilities for a role like that. They called me, but I know it has everything to do with the sustained work over the
yeah.
years, exclusively in women's basketball, and really making myself an expert and a face in this sport.
100%. What was that experience like? Were you there in Paris or
I
uh,
was.
you were? Because I know they don't send every commentary team to, some are remote, but you got to go. That's great.
Yeah, I got to go. I mean, imagine that release when it came out. It was like D Wade's doing men's basketball and LaChina Robinson just doing women's. And it was like, who's LaChina Robinson? But,
Well,
that's
those
famous.
a lot of us were like, what? Our girl got is dang, that's huge. Like we were like, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it
Um,
really was. Really was. But
what a
yeah, I was
crazy experience. You were over there for how long?
so I was there about 24 days. So they had us come early so we could get acclimated, a few days early so we could get acclimated to the time change. And actually, the basketball games started in Lille, which is
Yeah,
about an
yeah.
hour train ride outside of Paris. So both the men's and women's pool play were in Lille, which was a great experience. Everyone's like, "Don't you want to be in Paris?" I was like, "We'll get there for the medal rounds." But Lille was just a beautiful place, great shopping, food.
Oh,
The
cool.
games were great. So I was there about 20, 24, 25 days, somewhere around there.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
heard that atmosphere's, Coach Freeze went, I think, to two of the pool play games. She went to the one against Belgium, and I heard the atmosphere was crazy.
Oh my
Like, just
gosh.
being there, that like you can't imagine how crazy it is in that
Yeah,
environment.
basketball overseas, like it internationally, is different. And one of the things that I think is unique is that they're allowed to use different type of noisemakers. There
Mhm.
are so many
Yeah,
rules here when you go to basketball games, like you can't bring this, you can't have, I mean, they bring all kinds of stuff into the stadium and like it is just loud and crazy. And I actually happened to go to some of the men's games too. So I was at that game where Steph Curry went
yeah,
nuts on
yeah.
France. I was like, where? I mean, literally, there's a picture of me when Steph is like, running away doing this. There's me in the background, like jumping up behind D Wade, acting crazy while I was calling the game. So it was an insane experience.
That's so cool. So since, oh, go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, this is not a question. I was just gonna say I have a comment about the noisemakers. I went to a basketball game in Africa over the summer. In Rwanda it was the championships of the Basketball Africa League, and they had an entire section of hundreds of people all drumming
Oh God.
the entire game.
Yeah,
And it was there was an announcer from the U.S. that was like, I've never seen anything like this. I've never heard anything like this. But it was the coolest environment ever.
That's crazy.
It was so sick. Like the energy in there was just
it's different.
incomparable. anything I've seen here.
That's
It
so
was
funny,
cool.
and then I think like, what was it? Was it Lisa Bluter last year that was complaining about they played music during somebody's free throws? And then
Yeah.
we got full on drumming going on during a whole basketball game, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I see someone's
Oh,
hand
yeah.
up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Miss Robinson. All right. So when you was talking about your reaction with D Wade, not gonna lie, I had the same reaction because Stephen Curry, he was guarded by Evan Fournier and someone else, just being double teamed, just putting up that shot. And when he made that, I was screaming too. And I'm like, dang, he just really made that.
I don't think I've ever seen a stretch of basketball like that in person in my life, and probably not on television either. Quite honestly, like he was
Yeah.
unconscious.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Also the fact that LeBron and KD were open and
Yeah, and he was like, "Nope, I'm taking this shot."
yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lucas.
I just wanted to say it's awesome that you are giving us your time, and I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say I really resonated with what you said about following what makes you, what you're passionate about. I think you said what makes you feel alive, and I'm kind of in a similar situation where I'm still figuring out what I want to do, and I just thought that was really good advice, and I'm gonna, kind of really try to listen to my inner self, and so thank you for that, because that's not what the career counselors say. They're like, oh, well,
True.
like here's what what your tests say or whatever. It's like, no, just yeah. So thank you for that.
No, I listen. I did not have a traditional path at all, right? And I was told all the same things. I mean, going from radio to actually being on television took me, of several years because everyone said, well, you don't have any experience. I didn't have all those things your counselor is telling you have to get to a certain place. But I think we're living in a time where you can get different types of experience and different types of education that make you valuable in a different way, not always the traditional or the standard. So I'm glad that resonated with you. And I just always find that if I wake up and I pursue that thing that's tugging at my heart and that I'm most passionate about, I'll never regret a day of my life, right? Because all we know is what it is that we're passionate about. And if you wake up in the morning thinking about something, then that's obviously, what you should look to pursue, right? And not to say that we don't evolve. Sometimes those things change. Like I said, I thought I wanted to be an AD, turned like 26, 27, quarter life crisis. Let's try broadcasting. I know it probably feels like you don't have room for error where you guys are right now because it is a competitive market, but your career is going to take so many twists and turns. Just let it, right? Like relax. You have plenty of time to figure it out. And that's the one thing I wish someone would have told me when I was your age, instead of like, oh, you got to do this. It's like, but if I don't, I'm also going to be okay. Right. And I'm not saying you slack, but you just make the best decision you can for yourself in that moment.
Yep. Go ahead, Wade.
First of all, nice to see another Nova person. Second of all, what was your specific process to getting that first Georgetown radio job?
Oh, getting the Georgia Tech radio opportunity?
Georgia Tech, I'm sorry, Georgia Tech, yeah.
Oh, no,
But
that's okay. Yeah, so what I will say is part of the key in navigating broadcasting is figuring out where what I call low-hanging fruit is, right? And not that these positions aren't competitive, but it just so happens, again, with being women's basketball, with me already working at Georgia Tech, it ended up being something that was easily accessible for me. They weren't paying me to do the radio, so not everyone was running to that opportunity, but what I needed was to be paid in experience. And sometimes that's an acknowledgement that we should make more often. Is there going to be some things that, yes, you get the money you're looking for, but there are going to be some things that get you the experience you're looking for or get you the network you're looking for. I needed the experience. And so it was actually by accident that I was traveling with the team and the person who's usually the analyst wasn't there. And they were like, hey, LaChina, didn't you play basketball? Would you want to do the radio broadcast? And I was like, sure. Now this was happening simultaneously to me kind of starting to make that turn towards broadcasting, but I hadn't had any real opportunity until that happened. And when I put on the headset, I was like, oh, I would do this for free. I would literally be at home saying the same exact things that I'm saying with this earphones on, like talking about the game. So it just clicked right away for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Um, what, one of the other themes in this class is how important relationships are, especially when you're, a member of the media, you're covering a game like you are, or you're a beat reporter, or whatever that may be. But also, relationships with coaches, with athletes, with PR people, like how that helps everyone do their job really effectively. And it's really important to take time, like, commentators, you guys come to shoot around every game day, right? To get to see teams and hear from them and talk to them. So how important are relationships, and, are there any relationships that I guess stand out, that you've really built over the years that have really impacted you in your career?
Yeah, the greatest value when you're in sports broadcasting is information, period. Like information that everyone else doesn't have. So when I sit in the chair, it's my job to not just know everything that you might be able to Google on the internet or get out of Rose's game notes, but it's my job to know more than that, to bring some value to the conversation over a game that you wouldn't learn otherwise, right? And how do you get that? You honestly get that through relationships. And that can manifest in several different ways. If you have a relationship with the SID, like Rose and the coach, then they'll let you come to shoot around. Or maybe I say, hey, Rose, I'm not able to get there in time to talk to Brenda. Can you get me on the phone with her? And Rose knows I've done this several times. And because of that relationship, Rose gets her on the phone. Because Brenda has respect for me, she puts Brenda on the phone. I can call if I have a game and one of my colleagues just maybe called this team 2 weeks ago. I might call them and say, hey, tell me a little bit about your experience watching LSU. What did you see? Things like that. Like you have so many different ways to accumulate information that will help you to present not only excellence in terms of, the X and O's of the game, but you can bring another level of depth of knowledge through those relationships you have. Also, what I would say in terms of where you guys may be in your career journey, you're building relationships constantly. I've mentioned volunteering. I think that's a wonderful way to build relationships. I would shadow broadcasters when they came to Atlanta, came to Georgia Tech to do games, and just listen to how they talk, how they prepare. And while I'm there doing that, I'm also meeting a producer. I'm meeting a director. I'm meeting people who are working on the production staff. And the number of times that I've gotten phone calls to do games where they've said, hey, someone said that, you want to do a few more basketball games. Well, we've got a high school game down here. We need an analyst, and all of that came from relationships of just simply volunteering. Right. And then the other relationship that's been instrumental to me is mentoring. And I cannot overstate the value of having mentors and meeting people that are in the places you want to be, but also just meeting people that are experts in any field. I think about one of my early mentors was a man named Paul Griffin. And Paul was an AD. I think he was at South Florida at one point. At this point, his career had brought him to Georgia Tech, and he was like an associate AD. And when I started to get into broadcasting, I kept my connection with Paul from my time at Georgia Tech. And Paul and I would visit from time to time. And what Paul would share with me was how television contracts work with schools. He would say, okay, this is the time of year that we sign our deals. This is how the distribution happens of games. These are the people who make decisions on who's going to be on the call for those games. So Paul couldn't necessarily put me on a game, but he would put me on to game, meaning he could teach me the backside of broadcasting and how the business works, which then gave me an opportunity to widen my scope and understand how I can get more chances to be on screen and things that I would need to know to navigate the business. So those are just a few examples, Rose. I think Paul was definitely someone early in my career that was very helpful. Carolyn Peck was helpful for me as a broadcaster and someone who sat down with me and showed me her game boards. But relationships are everything.
Huge.
Have you ever, had a time where you disagreed with a boss or a leader, and kind of how do you work through that? I've heard from interns and other young people, sometimes that can be really hard, a hard thing to deal with. So I like to ask our guest speakers kind of how do you handle something like that? You know what I mean? Kind of speaking up when you need to.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how big that difference is, right? I mean,
Right.
are we talking about something that's the difference between printing on legal document paper and printing on letter size paper?
Yeah.
Or if we're talking about world or life views, right? I'll tell you about something that happened to me, and I don't know that I've ever shared this story with anyone, but when I was at ESPN, there was a situation where there was an athletics director at Missouri who had accused Dawn Staley of inciting an environment of racism at her games. And it was a very tense time. It was a very tense situation. And me getting on social media, fired up my Twitter and basically accused the Missouri AD of slander in not so many words. Just basically said that I didn't agree with what he said about Dawn Staley. I didn't think it was true. And so it was a very tense moment for all of us. But the next moment would be even more tense when I got a phone call from my boss who said, you know, you basically that this is a crime, right? Like you can't accuse somebody of slander, and they didn't agree with how I went about it. And I was concerned about my job. I was concerned about whether I would have one. I was worried if I had made a mistake that would derail my career, and all of a sudden, right, like no more LaChina on television. And so I called my parents and we talked about it. I just told them, I was like, listen, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want you to know that I said this. I believe in what I said, but my company doesn't really agree with it. And the point that I got to through talking to my parents was when you lay your head on the pillow tonight, are you going to be okay with how you showed up? Like, are you going to rest knowing that you did what you believed in? Or are you going to feel that you did the wrong thing just because there may be consequences, right? So that's a rule that I kind of adopted in terms of my values was, can I lay my head on the pillow regardless of what I might lose when I wake up tomorrow? Can I feel good about what I stood for and what I said and what I did when I wake up the next morning, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, I stood behind what I said. I understood the company's perspective, and I was okay with them making whatever decision they felt like they needed to make.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that's great advice. Yeah, you have at the end of the day, you answer to yourself, in your
Yep.
conscience, your beliefs, and, yeah, you have to stand up for that 100%. Anybody have any other questions for LaChina? No? Oh, one in the back, good.
Obviously you're from the DMV, you're from the DMV area, which is synonymous with being rich in basketball culture, and obviously you play basketball. So I just wanted to ask you, and I guess this is kind of like a two-part question. How do you think that the DMV has helped with the growth of basketball, just in general, nationwide? And also, as a woman, seeing kind of like this new renaissance of women's sports kind of the viewership kind of growing at an exponential rate. How do you feel about that as well?
I'm sorry. You have a deep voice, which is beautiful, but I could not hear your questions. I'm sorry.
Oh,
What
here, come on up closer into the camera.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, it might be
No, you're
your
good.
distance too.
My fault.
No, you're good. Can you hear him better now?
Go ahead. Yes, I can hear you
yeah.
much better. Yep.
So, obviously, like I said, you're from the DMV, and the DMV is synonymous with basketball culture, and also as a woman in sports and having played women's basketball in college, the growth of the women's basketball game has grown exponentially over the past couple of years, especially last year with obviously like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark coming into the W. So how do you feel that the DMV has helped with the growth of basketball, women's basketball, and how do you feel like women's basketball in general has grown over the past couple of years?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question. I mean, I think the DMV has contributed to the success of women's basketball in a major way. Some of it is individual players that have come from the area, like a Kara Lawson going to West Springfield, and now she's the head coach at Duke, right? But some of it is also just the collective of schools that we have there that have had a lot of success over time. You know, I know Virginia is pushing their way back on the scene, but, and I know you don't consider that DMV, but when I was growing up, that was one of the schools that I looked to, right? Not too far down the road, but the Final Fours that they went to, or Maryland. I mean, I said this to Brenda when I was just there recently, that Maryland made me proud. Like the way that their women's basketball team has achieved, winning a national championship, all the Final Fours, like that made me so proud to be a part of DMV women's basketball culture. Or, you know, Christy Tolliver, for example, who swears she's from the DMV, even though, you know, she's from closer to Harrisonburg than anything. But, you know, those are the things that come to mind for me. Tierra Ruffin Pratt, who played at my same high school, that got drafted to the WNBA. Like there's been a plethora of players that have come through that area that have played highest level. Monique Curry, for example, who ended up going to Duke, but is from DC. And even the sustained excellence of the Mystics from a support standpoint, right? Like they won their championship finally, and I know there's been some rough years, but that's a franchise where the Mystics were leading the league, the WNBA, in attendance at one point. A lot of people don't know that. So that speaks volumes for the fandom and the basketball excellence in that area, and how people respect the game, even on the women's side, before we've seen this big explosion of popularity for the WNBA and for women's basketball. And just to speak to that briefly, you're seeing this rise, this exponential rise in success for women's basketball across the board, college and WNBA, because of increase in investment. In my mind, and Rose, I'm sure you probably feel the same, the game has always been great. Now, don't get me wrong. Over time, it's gotten faster. It's gotten more athletic, just like any other sport. The longer it's around, you know, we have access now to our phones. I mean, when I was a kid, I would have loved to have YouTube and be able to play back highlights and practice them in my yard. So there's been a growth in the game itself. But more than anything, it's just more people, in my opinion, taking the blinders off. And instead of saying, oh, it's women's basketball, giving it a chance. It's basketball, like actually watching it, taking it in. I think social media has helped as well with the growth of women's basketball, because we've gotten to know their players. There once was a time where marketing dollars were not, we still need to get better, but were not put into women's basketball. And so what did the players do? Once social media came around, they started using their own platforms. They started marketing themselves to the fans, and just different changes like that over time, I think, have led to this explosion in popularity. But it takes the television broadcast networks like ESPN and like Fox. They're making a greater investment in NBC. So there's more visibility for the sport of women's basketball. There's just a number of things that have happened over time that add to the popularity, but it's more people just honestly giving it a chance, saying yes, committing more dollars to it, with the brands and people behind the scenes. You know, I think all those things have contributed to the growth, but it's been great to see. And I hope I answered your question.
Agreed, totally. Go ahead, Jenna.
So knowing that like you came from a basketball background, I was wondering like how, if it's ever been challenging to kind of prioritize unbiased analysis while also maintaining positive relationships with the players and coaches that you cover, and like if you've ever kind of had trouble with that balance, is like any examples come to mind?
Yeah, you know, it's something that I have to keep in mind, right, before I call a game. It doesn't matter what my relationships are with coaches or with the school, because I have had to call some Wake Forest games. I have a job to do. And what I find is that people in this business respect your ability to do your job and do it in an unbiased way. And that's the only reason why I feel like I've been sustained in this industry for so long, is Do I have coaches that I enjoy talking to, some more than others? Absolutely. I had a coach when I was covering WNBA, Cheryl Reeves. She would always give me the Popovich treatment in games. So it was like one quick yes, no answer and then kind of walk away. Sometimes she wouldn't even give me an interview. So, those times are definitely tough, but the game is not about my enjoyment. It's about doing my job. It's about making sure information is properly shared. It's about documenting the game. It's about, being fair, quite honestly. Does that mean I don't get on the officials? Absolutely, I get on the officials. But yeah, you can't let those relationships get in the way of doing your job, because my job is to serve the fan, not the Maryland fan, not the Wake Forest fan, the everyday fan that has come to be entertained and to learn about the game. And in order to do that, I have to put those relationships and different feelings aside.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions for LaChina before we let her go? All right, well, LaChina, we very much appreciate your time and sharing all your experiences and your advice. This was so wonderful to hear. So thank you so much. Appreciate you and can't wait to see you on TV soon. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Rose.
Thank you, Ms.
Good luck to you
Robinson.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
Woo!